Fundamentals, Discipline, and Great Character by Daniel Dubois tonight. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your man, Sean Zittel. Just got done calling that live for Fabio Wardley and Daniel Dubois. And voice a little tired because it was a great fight with a lot of ebbs and flows. Well, good amount of ebbs and flows as Daniel Dubois knocked out Fabio Wardley in the 11th round, I believe. Stopped him on his feet, which Wardley was incredibly tough in this fight, but let's get into it. Daniel Dubois' experience and pedigree and IQ really pulled through for him in this fight. And that experience gap has showed up in this fight. Sometimes fighters that are more explosive or talented than the other guy than them, they make up for that experience gap with other tools. And Wardley was the more explosive fighter, which is why I thought he would win this fight. But and it showed early, but he couldn't settle down. I didn't like, if you go back to my live call immediately, even after the first knockdown, let alone the second one in the third round, I didn't like Wardley's energy in this fight. He was over anxious. He was almost fighting like with a sense of, lack of a better word, fear, because fear is too strong a word, but a fear of, if I don't get this guy out of here right now after these early knockdowns, I'm in for a long night. And in for a long night he was. And those two right hands, it was the same punch both times, the sweeping right hand over the top, off the up jab that hit Dubois on the top of the head, not on the chin, that knocked his equilibrium off and sent him to the canvas. And Wardley, even though he had success with that punch, with those two knockdowns, he was missing it 95% of the time. And he was one note with his offense. It was the same setup over and over again, an up jab, sweeping right hand, or an up jab, straight right hand. And what Dubois would do is either take it away from him by slipping it and getting underneath the shot, or by just, he had a good step back game. He would take a step out when it was the 1-2 down the pipe and make him fall short. So really good job by Don Charles in this fight. You know, my man Radio Raheem, and we'll recap this fight tomorrow morning. My man Raheem, who was working with David Hay for this fight, he always talks up Don Charles to me. He's a big Don Charles advocate. And being here stateside in the United States, part of me is like, you know, what's the big deal with Don Charles, right? Not as familiar with him as they are in the United Kingdom, where he's very revered and very respected. And he was excellent in the corner. Even with me having the audio on mute as I'm calling the fight on the channel, he did the classic Felix Trinidad dad slap, where sometimes Felix Trinidad would go down early in fights. Yuri Boy Campus comes to mind. David Reed comes to mind. He'd return to his corner, and his dad would give him a double slap, bam, bam, and then point at him as if to say, lock the fuck in, you know, tighten up. And kind of, you know, Roy Jones did a similar thing with Kevin Newman about a month and a half ago when Newman was letting that fight get away from him against Elijah Garcia. But these guys picked the right moment to do it. Anyways, Don Charles, he does that. And Dubois, his composure was phenomenal in this fight. His pace was phenomenal in this fight. He really paced himself well, and had a great poker face in this fight, getting up from those two knockdowns, never leaving his jab. That was the experience showing apart, because Wardley, they have two types of different jabs. Dubois has a fundamentally sound, stiff, heavy, usually this kind of shotgun jab. Wardley has a quick up jab from his waist, from his hip, and or even lower than that, the up jab. And Wardley, if he had the experience to realize, let the fight come to you a little bit more. Stop trying to force what isn't working. That it's worked for you twice, I get it. You got two knockdowns with it, but stop trying to force that right hand over the top. Use your up jab a little bit more. There was a moment in the 8th round where Wardley landed a right uppercut that gave him a little bit of a sign of life in the 8th round when things were completely going Dubois' way. And I had Dubois winning this fight 96-92 at the time of the stoppage. I thought Wardley only won the 2 rounds he got knockdowns in. But Dubois, he never started fighting too fast. He saved his energy throughout for the right spots. And he was very crafty in the clinches. He came in heavy at 251, and he used every pound of it wisely. He had some Lennox Lewis in his game in those clinches. A lot of times, Wardley would get underneath shots, try to get to his defensive position. Tim Bradley, he tells me it's the oh shit defensive position, where you kind of slink to one side or the other. You take your eye off the target, and it's just a get out of dodge defensive maneuver. It's not the most disciplined, educated maneuver. You can get away with it if you're a certain level of athleticism. He originally told me about this move back when Caleb Plant was heading into the Canelo fight, and you saw Caleb, when he'd get against the ropes against Canelo, do it a number of times. You slink to your lower left or your lower right, and you kind of you take your eyes off the target. It'll work, but it's not something you want to consistently use to be effective at a high level. So, Wardley, he would do that, and Dubois would sometimes headlock him. And Lennox Lewis used to do that to guys too in the clinch. And there was a few times he would get Dubois in a clinch and lean against him on the ropes. Hell, he would even grab a rope with the ref not looking and get more leverage, leaning that extra 10 pounds on him. And that was tiring Wardley out. And Wardley was also getting tired out from winging those right hands over and over again and hitting nothing but air. So Wardley was huffing and puffing fairly early in the fight, and Dubois not fighting too fast, but not getting away from his jab too far, controlling the fight, slowly breaking Wardley down. And then Dubois didn't go to the body a lot, but one of the first times he went to the body at the end of the 5th round was at an opportune time, right when he knew Wardley was starting to feel it, and he dug a left hook to the body. He touched the body in spots, but that one moment was very smart by him in the 5th round as the momentum was changing and the scorecards were changing in his direction. So really smart fight by Dubois. This is the second time he has gotten up from multiple knockdowns to win a fight by knockout. He did against Kevin Lerena, and now he's done it against Fabio Wardley, whose trainer, Ben Davison, came up short again against Daniel Dubois. Had a bad game plan for Anthony Joshua, who got knocked out as a favorite to Daniel Dubois. His guy was the slightest of favorites tonight, and he gets stopped again. A lot of people are saying Ben Davison was too brave for his own good in this fight, for his fighter's own good. I tend to agree, but to be fair to Ben, Wardley in the 10th round landed a big right hand. Dubois took it better than he did the earlier right hands. He reacted to it a little bit. It was a good shot. It got his attention, but he had already taken a lot of the steam out of Fabio Wardley, so he wasn't having the kind of reaction that earlier right hands were having. But still, point being, between the 8th round, when Wardley swept the right hand of the body, mixed some punches up, got the right uppercut in there, he produced a moment that buzzed Daniel Dubois, and then the ref jumped in too soon. He must have thought the 10-second mark was the final bell of the round, and right when they were viciously exchanging, he jumped in too soon. But what do you know, it produced a moment for Fabio Wardley that if maybe he switched up his punch selection a little earlier, he could have had more success instead of over and over again, the up jab, sweeping right hand, the up jab, straight right hand, that obviously Dubois worked on in camp and scouted with Don Charles and was prepared, even though he got dropped by it twice, to not let that beat him. And Wardley, not showing the IQ, not showing the experience, kept trying to do it over and over again. But what do you know, in the 8th round, when he switched up the punch selection a little bit, it produced a moment for him, but, not enough. And it's an inspiring story for Daniel Dubois, who after the Joe Joyce got knocked out, he's now going to become so revered in the United Kingdom and in the boxing world for just showing that, once a quitter, not necessarily always a quitter, to use that kind of language with him, that you can't count guys out. Israel Vasquez retired on his stool, technically quit against Rafael Marquez in the first fight, but I don't think anyone would ever think of Magnifico Vasquez, rest in peace, as a quitter. So, and Daniel Dubois isn't a quitter. He has quit in fights, but he's a winner. He's a winner more than he is a quitter. He's shown more grit now in more fights than he has quit, or at least as many of them. So it's boxing. It's fucking tough. Some guys can push you to your limit, break you down, and make you say you had enough that night. Other times you're going to bite down and push through adversity that 99.9% of us can't. So make of that what you will. So, but overall, I do think for Ben Davison, back to that point, he was probably a little too brave for his fighter, and maybe part of that is ego. Ben's still a young trainer, who I think is definitely a good trainer, but Dubois has produced two of his, ugliest moments in the corner, and maybe wanting to get some redemption through this performance from his fighter, because he held on a little bit too long, and Wardley took a hell of a lot of punishment. So for Wardley, if he could find a way to settle down his energy in this kind of environment again, because I think that burnt him up, along with winging and missing big right hands, hitting nothing but air. If he could work on a left hook, because he has a good right hand, obviously. He has a good right hand down the pipe, over the top, but it has to be disguised and trapped better against better opponents now going forward. And if he could find a left hook in his game, because he doesn't really have dogs barking in the hood, because he doesn't really have a left hook. He has an uppercut, he has a right hand, he has a good up jab, but he doesn't really have a left hook. And just keep tightening things up, get a bounce back fight, and then jump back in the top 10. He doesn't really have a lot of time to rebuild at 31 as a late starter, but he's a damn good heavyweight. I think this fight is on the short list of the best fights in the new millennium in the heavyweight division. Look, Usyk Fury 1 and 2 were higher level fights than this. In a way, Nakatani was a much more high level fight than this was last week, but this was a pretty pure action fight. And even though it got one-sided a bit in the last several rounds, Wardley never actually going down and having the 2 knockdowns on his side to keep some hope on the scorecards until we got to around the 10th, 11th, or even really the 11th. Because even heading into the 10th, if he wins 10, 11, 12, he could pull out a draw even without a knockdown. But this fight, along with Klitschko-Lewis, Klitschko-Joshua, Blachowicz, Layman Brewster, Fury Wilder 3. You know, in this fight, add more in the chat if I'm forgetting. Usyk Fury 1 was really, really good. But I think these are the most pure action championship level, because all those fights I mentioned were for a world title at least, if not the title. Then those are the best, just pure action fights in the heavyweight division since the new millennium. This fight was pretty much a classic, I think. So it'll definitely be remembered in British boxing lore. Going forward, now, luckily for Ben Davison, I do think his best pupil would do the job. I do think Moses Saitama would beat Daniel Dubois, but I don't want to harp on that too much, because what Dubois has done today deserves a lot of credit and should be commended. He's the man of the hour, so I won't harp on that too much. For the division's sake, I would like to see that. I do think now that Wardley and that conflict of interest they have the same trainer, now that that's out of the way, this fight should be easier to make. I don't know if Frank Warren wants to do it. I don't know if he wants to match his guys. Maybe not, probably not, maybe not. I don't know. But I do think Aitama would beat Dubois. I think Aitama would beat Caballel. Okay, well, now I'm chilling in my destination's backyard's pool. So anyways, yeah, I think Aitama is just such a superlative talent that he could beat Caballel and Dubois. He's much faster than both of them and dynamic. But what I'm saying is he needs to beat a guy like that to earn and prove he's ready for the guy who, along with Inoue, is the best fighter in the world, pound for pound, and the undisputed heavyweight king in Usyk. But I won't harp on that too much right now. Dubois, and Frank Warren's talking about Moses Saitama having his debut in the United States around August. So, you know, he's not talking about making that fight next year. And he probably would want Dubois to get a homecoming title defense. I think a third Usyk fight makes no sense. I've never heard of a trilogy where one of the fighters got stopped twice and then they still have a third fight anyways. So that doesn't make sense to me. If anything, a Joshua rematch would make more sense, but they're lining up Joshua for Fury. So maybe Dubois and Caballel or Dubois and a homecoming defense is a lot more realistic. But for me, and I think 65% of people on DAZN voted they want to see Aitama. I think Aitama, it's that time. It's that time for that kind of step-up fight. I mean, he's the WBO either mandatory or interim champion or, you know, anyways. So Aitama, I pick him against anybody not named Usyk. And if he can prove himself against a guy like Caballel or Dubois, then Usyk will be the fight to make, as long as Usyk isn't retiring soon right now. By the way, on the undercard, David Morrell, shocking knockout loss. And, it's hard to compartmentalize how much of it is what. in terms of how much of it is him just being exposed at light heavyweight against bigger guys and higher level of competition, although this is supposed to be a showcase fight, and how much of it is what Ismael Salas talked to me about years ago, which is some Cuban fighters, when they make it to the United States, make a good amount of money, get a much more level of freedom. They can get caught up in nightlife. They can take their eye off the ball. I think it might be a bit of both. But Morrell was a guy who showed athleticism, talent, and power at 168, but against lesser caliber of opposition and smaller men. And in all 4 fights at light heavyweight, even the 2 he's won against Katayev, which was a very close disputed call, and against Hot Rod Kalajic, which was supposed to be his showcase first outing at 175, he just hasn't translated as impressive. Part of it might be he was more sizzle than steak, it turns out. His special effects and all that looked flashy, jumped off the screen at 168, but they don't have the substance. And then part of it might be a fighter underachieving, showing up a little flat and uninspired lately. So he's got to figure that out, and in a hurry quick. That fight against Benavidez at the time was a fight a lot of people didn't think Benavidez would take. They were saying he wouldn't take that while he was busy calling out Canelo. He took it and won and deserved credit for that and got credit for that, but it isn't aging well at the same time. So that's the truth there. But the man of the hour is Daniel Dubois. Great performance in a heavyweight classic kind of fight, and much credit to him and to Don Charles, and much credit to Fabio Wardley in a losing effort too. So that's it, and that's all. Stay tuned. See you guys tomorrow with Raheem. Peace. And again, while Daniel's never been the heavyweight champion, he deserves some credit. There are, paper champions with no real credibility to their world title. And then there's guys who are clearly the lineal king, or at best the undisputed champion of a division. But there's some gray area in between there. There are guys who deserve some merit for capturing a world title, even if they're not truly the man. And I think between knocking out Joshua as IBF champion and now stopping Fabio Wardley as WBO champion, Dubois deserves credit and merit as a world title holder, even if obviously the king of the division is Alexander Usyk. So that, and again, we mentioned the punch selection changing up a little too late for Fabio Wardley, like the right uppercut in the 8th round. No adjustments in the corner by Ben Davison, but the man of the hour again is Daniel Dubois. Credit to Triple D.